Well, for more on Europe's economic and political landscape, let's bring in Jacob Kirkegaard, Senior Fellow at the Peterson Institute for International Economics, right here in Washington. Welcome to the show, Jacob.
My pleasure.
Now, let's start with the jobs picture. According to Eurostat statistics, unemployment in the Eurozone fell in February to its lowest level since May of 2009. And that's despite uncertainty over Brexit and several key elections coming up this year. What do you think is behind this momentum?
Well, I think there are several things. First of all, we shouldn't get carried away about the sort of potential for political uncertainty in the Eurozone. We've had now elections both in the Netherlands and in one of the German states. And it's actually turned out that the mainstream incumbent parties have done very well. So, and I personally do not believe Marine Le Pen will be president of France, nor will the far-left candidate. So actually the political picture is a lot better than what is often assumed, in my opinion. And it's not so surprising, therefore, that the economy, which, by the way, is still benefiting from a strong fiscal stimulus, monetary stimulus by the ECB, and a relatively significant fiscal stimulus as well. It is doing quite well, despite these political concerns.
Now, a lot of people were worried about the impact of Brexit. Doesn't seem to be quite as bad as first predicted. How do you see that, though, affecting European employment in the longer term once some of these negotiations really take shape?
Well, I think the Brexit negotiations certainly have the potential to create a very negative economic shock. But it's going to be a shock that will predominantly affect the UK economy, while in my opinion, any impact on the sort of broader EU 27 economies and therefore also employment levels will be relatively muted and isn't going to take away from the fact that not only is unemployment in the euro area and in the EU falling, but more importantly, employment rates are actually at close to historical highs, highlighting the fact that you have actually, since the crisis in 2010 to 12, seen some significant structural reforms in labor markets in a number of countries that are now beginning to work.
Now, despite those reforms, though, we are still seeing something of a tale of two Europes. We have Germany's jobless rate at 3.9%, best in the Eurozone. And then at the other end, you have Greece, still hovering around 23%, and also creditors calling for higher income tax starting in 2020. How does Greece and perhaps other countries with this stubbornly high jobless rate, how do they get people back to work and get more momentum in the economy?
Well, I mean, there's no doubt that the regional differences within the Eurozone and the EU are staggering. But I think actually that what you have in the case of Germany is an example of one of the components that are needed. Because Germany actually did a very thorough and comprehensive labor market reform in the early 2000s, and that actually has turned out in the long run to be very beneficial. So that's what you're going to have to do in other euro area countries as well, certainly including Greece. But Greece, of course, also have as an issue that you're not going to get sustained growth in Greece without debt relief, without the ability to create a more safe and predictable investment climate to get growth. So you need both structural reform, debt relief, and some sort of stimulus to get growth going in Greece. And so far, you, quite frankly, have got neither of those three components.
So, Jacob, let's look at some of the challenges. What do you see then as the biggest threats to stability and growth in the Eurozone?
No, I mean, I think the biggest threat in the medium term is Italy, which is a country which has an election no later than May next year. And if you look at current polls, at least, you could get a situation where it's going to be virtually impossible to form a government because of the strength of the Five-Star Movement and other populist parties. So whereas I'm pretty sort of zen about France, Germany, other elections, I believe Italy is the one to watch.
All right, certainly we'll be taking heed of that and check that prediction. Thank you so much, Jacob Kirkegaard, Senior Fellow at the Peterson Institute for International Economics.